and proposals to provide housing choice paper, and there are a series of recommendations there which, in order to get the debate moving, I will move. Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded by Andrew Turner. Right, now we've got the staff at the table. And I think probably it would be appropriate just to ask councillors if they have particular questions that they would like to direct to staff. I think some councillors have indicated that there are questions that they want to clarify at the table. Jani Johansson.
Yeah, I just wondered if staff could just outline, in terms of the public having any knowledge of these comprehensive developments, what notification, if any, they would receive, and how they would discover that these developments were happening in their areas, both now and possibly in the future. So, yeah, what mechanism will people have to be aware of the fact that these mechanisms have been put in place and the developments that are occurring?
These mechanisms, if they're introduced by the Minister, we understand will be introduced through Section 27 of the SIR Act, so they would become an immediate change to the city plan. There would be no formal notification of any landowner or party whose land was subject to those changes. In respect of the Living 2 and Living 3, in respect of any individual who wanted to pursue that on their own property or through the purchase of land, they would rely on the city plan to inform them of those rules. I think this provision, where the comprehensive development mechanism is used, and if that is used, that's a resource consent, but it's not notified, so there would be no obligation on council to consult with any third party.
Can I just?
As Richard's just pointed out, the proposal to create some form of mechanism to allow comprehensive development was obviously in the draft LERP. So the concept as a concept was understood. The application of it may not be.
I think that, just by way of clarification, I think the question really directs one's attention to 4.21 in your report, which indicates that although it wouldn't be a statutory area-wide master planning process, it would be a non-statutory one requiring the main developer or agency to actually talk with the local community. In fact, it refers to a phase of community participation, and that would cover the community housing redevelopment mechanism. But the comprehensive development mechanism wouldn't be covered by that, because that's in Living 2 and 3, which actually could end up with worse implications than a comprehensive development mechanism under this, especially where there's a buffer between that and Living 1. Would that be correct?
Yes, Living 2 and Living 3 are different in so much as they already allow a more intense form of development. In fact, use of the comprehensive development mechanism in those zones would create a better urban design outcome than people could currently do as of right now if they chose to.
Are there any other questions? Jani Johansson?
Just had several more questions. One is in regards to the kind of legal test that we have to be satisfied with as a council. You know, obviously we've had some High Court cases around pressure sewer systems, for example. Have we turned our mind to any consideration of that the decisions that we're making around recommending this, whether or not they've passed any legal test in terms of decision making, in terms of the Local Government Act, and seeking the views of people that are going to be impacted by these outcomes?
I think think we have to understand that this is a process that's actually being developed through the SIR Act, so the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Act and legislation, so that has its own process and its own consultative process. So that's and in fact what a council is doing in this instance is actually effectively offering a position to the minister, so that it is the decision of the minister, and he needs to satisfy the tests not under the Local Government Act but under the CER Act, that he is acting within that, and that he has acted appropriately within the legislation he's operating under. And I suppose to round that out, this recovery plan was a result of, if you recall, the minister taking some actions in late 2011, early 2012, which were appealed to the High Court, and the court at that stage suggested that the most appropriate way for the minister to address these matters was through a recovery plan, which is what he's done pursuant to his legislation.
Could I just ask you to clarify the different scenario that would apply if the government hadn't come back to the council and asked for us to have some input into the plan?
Yes, certainly. So, as councillors will realise, that there was a number of conversations that went on as we tried to work out what the floating zone might look and feel like, and staff discussed a number of iterations. The government took some of our early thinking and actually applied those concepts rather differently, and the plan, unfortunately, I have a black and white version, but it's scenario 3 would have seen large swathes of the living one zone certainly open to this form of intensification, and that we believed as officials went beyond what we believe the community had any expectation of or the right to expect, but also basically started to address the issue at a scale that we thought was more appropriate to the city plan review process. And that is something the council also indicated through the draft LERP proposal, that in fact the city plan was the most appropriate way to comprehensively look at density and development in the broad mass of the living one zone.
Paul Lonsdale?
Yeah, look, I just wanted to say that I think this council's done a great job negotiating for the betterment on the public's perspective. So the outcome that we've sort of arrived at, I think, in comparison to what we could have actually had, has been a really great move forward. So I just want to thank you guys for your work you've done on that as well.
Tim Scandrett?
Just a question with regards to thoughts. Obviously, we've done some work on modelling of the pressures on sewage and stormwater, and also traffic modelling, because that will be one of the questions that I think the public will be looking at.
Certainly, I mean, traffic is slightly more complex than, say, sewer, because you know where stuff goes down a pipe, and you know that it can only go down that particular pipe. What we do know, of course, is that the traffic in the city has changed considerably, and so we're getting pressure points where we didn't. I think at the scale that we're working at, particularly with the comprehensive development mechanism and the ones being located in some of the suburban areas, we're confident the scale of those changes are not significant in terms of their impact on the network, and obviously we'll be able to fine-tune the network if and when development starts to occur in those areas.
Glenn Livingston?
Thank you. I just wish to check that I'm reading a table correctly, and estimated sources of supply for 2016 in terms of number of homes/sections is 16,000. The contingency in the table is 8,000. So I just want to read, is at first reading, is that what it is? So it's actually at 50%. Have I got that?
Yes, and of course even those broad figures in the table in 4.2 are estimates, and they're rounded estimates. I think that's consistent with the intention of the government, and certainly the intention of the minister for some time, to ensure that there is an abundant supply of opportunity. bearing in mind that we know that not everybody's going to take the opportunity up that they have, be that greenfields or comprehensive.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for officials? Jimmy Chen.
One question regarding to the paragraph 3.11, the remove for occupancy, the restriction for elderly persons. The sub-item, the 2, the change the CC plan to either A and B. I'm not sure what's the difference A and B. Can you explain?
Yes, certainly. The reference looks to recognise how we might deal with people going forward who are not covered by the temporary workers accommodation definition, but who may wish to occupy what are traditionally elderly persons housing units. So the two models that we have put up, one is to introduce a rule that will require the other occupants of that particular block of units to give their consent or their agreement for somebody who's non-qualifying to occupy it. That's option A. Option B is to rely on what effectively is the current mechanism, which is relying on the body corporate that these developments have, because they're all unit titled, they're required to have a body corporate, and the body corporate can specify whether people need to have a qualifying age or not. So they are really two different ways. One is using the city plan as an upfront mechanism, one is relying on the Unit Titles Act and the body corporate processes under civil law to exercise that control. And the recommendation, I think you'll see at the back, is to use the city plan as the mechanism.
Any other questions for officials? Phil Clearwater.
Clarify one thing, just on at 311 with the conversion, with the chart, with the table there, conversion of large homes to 2 units. The term revised recommendation, no change, in effect means continuing the present council, the previous council's position.
That's correct. It was supported by the previous council, and the recommendation is we will continue to support that option.
Pauline Cotter.
Thank you. Just talking about the, with the intensification will now be focused more around, primarily around Housing New Zealand areas, with perhaps a buffer zone out there. And the comprehensive development mechanism actually is there to ensure high quality urban design. Now where does the council fit in ensuring that with Housing New Zealand developments? Are they prepared to work with council ensuring those designs? Clarify that for me.
Under both mechanisms, the comprehensive development mechanisms, be they for individuals or for community housing, they would still require a resource consent. They would still require an urban design assessment. So council would be involved in that process. And we have been working obviously with Housing New Zealand as the major social housing agent in the city around their plans, and have had extensive discussions with them regarding that. I think the other aspect relates to the fact that, as the Mayor earlier pointed out, there's a second action in the LURP around requiring a sort of a more comprehensive look at the development of wider areas, so we're not limiting those to site-by-site redevelopments. There is also a process in place, a dialogue, I suppose, with the key partners to look at those other matters as well. Yeah.
Have we got any other questions? No? Thank you for that. Right, so who would like to commence the debate? Andrew Turner and Livingstone.
Thank you. It's well acknowledged that there's a need for additional housing in the city. We're aware of the upcoming pinch, as it's described, and we're already seeing the effects of increased pricing, both for purchasing houses and for renting houses, and we're seeing a number of effects of lack of supply already, and that, of course, is predicted to get worse. It's also acknowledged through the work already done in the UDS that unchecked urban sprawl isn't the way forward. So infill of brownfield sites and intensification in existing residential areas is clearly one area that we're needing to look at to achieve what needs to be achieved. I certainly would have preferred to see a lot more community consultation in the sort of paper that's been put forward before us today. However, this isn't business as usual, and clearly there is a need to get this work underway so that we alleviate the effects of the housing shortage as quickly as we possibly can. And we also need to bear in mind that this piece of work isn't a piece of work that's been initiated by the council. Of course, it's a piece of work which has been done by ECAN on the direction of the minister. And certainly when you look at the evolution of the maps that are in the attachment to today's agenda, that certainly stands testimony to the work which has been done between council and the minister in arriving at a compromise, I guess we could call it, that is, in the circumstances, the best balance of private property rights and the need for intensification that we've been able to come to working through that process. I particularly wanted to draw attention to an area which concerned me in the agenda for last week's meeting relating to elderly persons housing, and I was particularly uncomfortable looking at the way the resolution was put last week with the fact that we were just going to allow the body corporate arrangements of over 60s developments to deal with the issue of allowing younger people to move into those developments. And we've certainly seen in our dealings with insurance and other matters recently that a lot of those body corporate arrangements are quite inadequate or are not that strong. And I was certainly uncomfortable with leaving regulation around this to those body corporate arrangements. So I'm particularly pleased to be able to support the recommendation today, including option A, where there's a need for those already living in those over 60s developments to agree to, between themselves, agree to younger people moving into there. So we're not allowing anything to happen that each person living in those units or owning those units wouldn't in fact be comfortable with. So whilst I was uncomfortable with that particular part of the resolution last week, with option A now inserted, and I certainly would urge councillors to support the recommendation including option A, I'm certainly very comfortable that we've got good controls through the city plan in there to ensure that those over 60s developments can remain exactly as that if it's what residents are wanting, or there is the option for those people to be able to make the changes to allow younger people to move in if that's what the residents of those developments desire. Thank you.
Dean Livingston.
Thank you. I wanted to speak early in this debate by way of providing a scene setter from the information given to us 2 days ago at the housing workshop. So just in terms of housing at the moment, in the city we've lost 2,500 rentals since the quakes. From all the social housing providers all up, we've lost 1,000 social housing units, 350 bed sits in the inner city, maybe mainly in the inner city east. House sale prices are running at an increase of 12% per annum. Rentals 10 to 15% per annum. The current average rental in the city now is $414 per week. Now that's a 42% increase on pre-earthquake levels. Here's another telling fact. Prior to the quakes, there were about 900 rentals available in the city per month. That's now cut back by 2/3, 300 a month. So we, or at least I, support the LERP as a framework for providing housing availability and choice against that backdrop of the current situation in the city. In fact, when some of us ran some housing summits, I think it was last year, one of the provisions actually came through, and that's what is colloquially known as the two-kitchen rule, where you can divide a house to, in effect, create an extra dwelling. So, in summary, I support the provisions which can assist in increasing the supply of housing because it's a supply-side problem. But I also support good urban outcomes. So I'm looking forward to this debate to seeing how we can manage both, and enabling the provision of more housing, but also retaining good urban outcomes in our living zones. And, you know, I'm really looking forward to a good debate and a good outcome on this for all of us.
Anyone else would like to? Yanni Johansson.
I just have a question of clarification of staff, because in regards to the elderly persons housing resolution that we're about to pass, in the appendix that we've got changes to the district plan, I can see no reference to what we've asked for.
Craft that rule, so the intention is there. What we've set out is quite clear. We will be relying on that delegation to do that over the next day or so.
I'm sorry, I don't see the delegation. Oh, okay. The delegation is given to the mayor.
Yeah, right at the end.
In Clearwater.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to speak as well. Cool, thanks. Great. Thank you. Thank you. I would like to speak to this report. I think the question was made. It's unfortunate we didn't have colour in the documents, but I think the community should really be aware of what the government wanted to do, which was this yellow map. This is what government have said they would do if we didn't come to a recommendation to support some more intensification in living zones. And you can see the yellow is pretty extensive. That would have been done without any community consultation. The public would have had very little notice that that was about to occur, and you could have seen a huge change to our city. So I think, you know, it's really needs to be put into context. What's happened here is that the council previous term did go back to government and say, here's where we got to, here's the ideas that we had, and we've revoked that in the previous resolution. But the council wasn't the one holding up the land use recovery plan. What happened was the minister and the government weren't happy with what council had decided and wanted us to revisit it in very short order, with the threat hanging over our head that this is what would be done if we couldn't come up with some agreement with them. So I commend us for not agreeing to this last week. I thought it was unfair that we got heavily criticised as somehow being delaying, when in fact council had already made its position clear. It's just that government didn't accept it and wanted the new council to take a different approach. I also think it is good that government have been upfront and open with us about what their intention was. And as you can see, the yellow map is pretty extensive. So, you know, I will reluctantly support the mechanism that is being proposed today. I do accept that there's a need for supply for housing in our city. I am still not convinced, you know, given that we've got 30,000 spare capacity under current zoning arrangements, I'm still not convinced that just opening up zoning is actually the way in which this housing is going to be delivered to affect the supply. The reality is that we're making changes to our district plan, removing regulations, making it easier, I guess, for development to happen in some zones where it might have been harder previously, but we still have a zoning capacity of 30,000 properties that could be developed and could be providing housing at the moment. That is not happening. And so we need to understand, as we go through the city plan review, why that isn't working. Because clearly just opening up more land isn't the answer. I do think that there's some pragmatic things in here around the 1 into 2 in terms of the sections, and also around the elderly person's housing. I do want to state that I think it's incredibly important that the elderly person's housing is recorded somewhere, captured, so that when future property owners or purchasers are looking at buying these properties, they are really clearly advised as to whether or not it's an elderly person's housing unit or whether or not it's become a workers' camp or a workers' village. I think people will need to know what they're getting in for, and we need to make sure that that information is put in place. So I will reluctantly support the idea that the concepts that we have come up with in terms of discussing with government. I do also want to commend the staff and the government and hopefully us for agreeing that there's a mechanism around the community housing redevelopment that enables a non-statutory master planning, area-wide planning approach to occur. Because what we don't want is government agencies or community housing agencies building the slums of tomorrow. What we actually want is better urban form. We want buildings that actually connect to local communities, and we want local people to be involved in the redevelopment of these areas. And so we have, I think, got a concession from government that we can put in a mechanism that enables us to be open and transparent in the local neighbourhoods about where some of this intensification is happening. And I think that's a really positive thing, because for anyone that's seen the Housing New Zealand developments in Richmond, it's probably the most frightening example of intensification that you would ever wish to put on a local community, and that community has rightfully reacted to it. So hopefully this enables us to get a better quality of design, a better quality of intensification than we currently have, and enables us to reduce some of the chronic housing issues facing our city. I still think there's a need for further government intervention on a whole bunch of other policy mechanisms around housing, other than just opening up land supply. Unfortunately, that hasn't been carried through into the LERP, and because it's a government document, we really are at the behest of what government wish. So I will support this today. I think it's important that we have opportunities to review it. I am concerned about the 5-year time frame, and I think maybe that's an issue we can raise, make sure we've got really good regular monitoring of what's happening, so that if things start to go pear-shaped, we can actually look at some interventions earlier than 5 years.
Jimmy Chen.
Yeah, I support this framework and support the staff recommendation, because like Councillor Glenn Livingstone, he mentioned, we have to review the, current situation. The demand for housing is huge than in the supply, But how to dealing with this issue? The rental fee increased to 15%, property increased to 12%. So the people can afford to pay. So we are not to take a positive way to dealing with this one. How do we to make the people's needs? So government actually with the council, three council, we have the same view and have the same page, would like to dealing with this issue and working together. Not only the central government or the local government, but also request the ECAN, SERA, and NATAF and some other agencies that work together as a team to resolve this problem. So that's, I think, we have the same goal, same burden, no any adult. And also, if we review in the last about a couple of weeks, we have any kind of issue or concern regarding to this land use recovery plan. We request Sarah, request the staff, to provide more information to clarify. So actually, right now, this map is probably different from the Councillor Yanni Johansson the map. This map is probably new amendment map. This we all understand. It's the kind of the comprehensive development mechanism with the some social housing cluster. This new revised one. So this one, my understanding, probably Mayor, majority council, we agree that this the new amendment. But absolutely, this not have a proper consultation, wide range the community, a community board and some other the people, etc. But through the district plan, the review, through the city plan, the review, still have the time to ask the people to have their say, to kind of visual amenity or landscape, etc. Still can meet the requirement. So right now, my personal view, the timing is very important. So I support this one. Thank you.
Does anyone else want to comment? Right, well, I want to.